Let us start the chapter on the classical theory of income and employment. Before explaining the Keynesian macro theory of income and employment, it will be right to first explain the classical theory regarding income and employment. The study of classical theory of income and employment is essential because some of the aspects of classical theory are more relevant to the conditions prevailing in the developing countries, and this theory highlights those factors which govern income and employment in the developing countries. While the Keynesian theory emphasizes the role of effective demand in the determination of income and employment, classical economists believed that in a free market economy, there was always a tendency towards the establishment of full employment of labor, and there was sufficient demand for the output produced. Classical theory of employment and output is based on two basic notions. First, Say's law, and second, wage price flexibility. According to the classical theory propounded by Ricardo and Adam Smith, levels of income and employment are governed by fixed capital stock on one hand and wage good funds on the other. It may be noted in the beginning that the classical theory believes in full employment or near full employment prevailing in the economy. This belief of classical theory regarding the existence of full employment in the economy is based on Say's law of market, put forward by the French economist J.B. Say. According to Say's law, supply creates its own demand. This implies that every increase in production made possible by the increase in the productive capacity or the stock of fixed capital will be sold in the market, and there will be no problem of lack of demand. Thus, classical economists rule out the possibility of overproduction, there being no problem in selling the output produced. According to Say's law, greater production automatically leads to a greater money income, which creates the market for the greater flow of goods produced. Thus, deficiency in demand being no problem at all, the process of capital accumulation and expansion of productive capacity will continue till all people are employed, and there is no reason why the productive capacity created remains unutilized or underutilized. According to this theory, the income which is not spent on consumer goods and thus saved will become investment expenditure. Therefore, investment equals saving. Thus, the leakage in the income flow caused by the saving is made up by the investment expenditure. In this way, a given productive capacity continues to be fully utilized and no problem of deficiency of demand arises. Classical economists thought that if price mechanism in a capitalist economy is allowed to work freely without any interference by the government, there is always a tendency towards full employment in it. Of course, they admitted that in advanced capitalist economies, often certain circumstances arise due to which they are not in full employment equilibrium. But they firmly believed that there was always a tendency towards full employment in the economy, and certain economic forces automatically operate so as to move the economy towards full employment. Therefore, according to the classical economists, whenever there are lapses from full employment level, these are removed automatically by the working of free price mechanism. The modern economists do not regard this aspect of classical theory of employment as valid and correct description of the real world. J.M. Keynes criticized the classical theory of automatic establishment for full employment. The classical theory of employment was based upon two assumptions. The first assumption is the classical theory of employment was based upon two basic assumptions. The first assumption is that there is always enough expenditure or aggregate demand to purchase the total production at full employment level of resources. In other words, in this theory, the classical economists disregarded the problem of deficiency of demand for purchasing goods produced at full employment level of resources. The second assumption is that even when deficiency of aggregate expenditure or demand arises, the prices, wages, and interest would adjust quickly so that equilibrium is restored at full employment level of output. The classical view that there was no problem of deficiency of expenditure and demand was based upon Say's law of market. Say has been a famous French economist of the 19th century. This law is based upon the fact that every production of goods also creates income equal to the value of goods, and these incomes are spent on purchasing these goods. In other words, production of goods itself creates its own purchasing power, that is, demand for buying them. Therefore, Say's law is expressed as supply creates its own demand. Another assumption includes the assumption of laissez-faire, which means that there is no government control. If there is government control, its objective is to ensure free competition. That means the theory assumes that free competition exists in the market. There are no monopolies or restrictive trade practices, and there is complete freedom of choice for producers and consumers to take their own decisions regarding pricing of commodities. Market forces of demand and supply are fully free to take their own course depending upon the demand and supply conditions in the market, and money is only a medium of exchange to facilitate transactions. It does not determine output and employment. Let us now talk about the wage price flexibility and full employment. The classical economists also proved the validity of the consumption of full employment with another fundamental logic. According to them, the amount of production which the business firms can supply does not depend only on aggregate demand or expenditure, but also on the prices of products. When aggregate demand for goods and services declines due to fall in investment, the economy will still remain at full employment level of output. According to them, this happens because product prices fall quickly so that quantity demanded increases to restore equilibrium at full employment level of output. In this way, they express the view that in spite of the decline in aggregate demand caused by the decline in investment, the real output, income and employment will not fall because the fall in prices of products brings about balance between demand and supply at full employment level of output. Classical economists thought that a free market capitalist economy is self-correcting. Owing to the intense competition between the sellers of products, as a consequence of the fall in demand, the prices will decline. This is because when aggregate expenditure on goods or demand for them declines, the various sellers and producers reduce the prices of their products so as to avoid the excessive accumulation of stocks of goods with them. Hence, according to the classical logic, decline in demand will bring down the prices of products and not the amount of production and employment. But now a question arises as to what extent the sellers or producers will tolerate the decline in prices. However, to make their business profitable, they will have to reduce the prices of the factors of production, such as labor. When due to the decrease in demand for output, demand for labor declines, this will cause a fall in wages quickly so that labor demanded increases to restore labor market equilibrium at full employment. Thus, a fall in wages of labor ensures that all workers will get employment. If some workers do not want to work at reduced wages, they will not get any job or employment and therefore will remain unemployed. But according to classical economists, those workers who do not want to work at lower wages and thus remain unemployed are only voluntarily unemployed. This voluntary unemployment is not real unemployment. According to the classical thought, it is involuntary unemployment which is not possible in a free market capitalist economy. All those workers who want to work at the going wage rate determined by market forces will get employment. That is, full employment of labor continues to prevail due to quick adjustment of wages. During the period 1929-33, when there was a Great Depression in capitalist economies, a renowned neoclassical economist by the name A.C. Pigou suggested a cut in wage rates in order to remove huge and widespread unemployment prevailing at that time. According to him, the cause of depression or unemployment was that the government and trade unions of workers were preventing the free working of the capitalist economies and were artificially keeping the wage rates at high levels. He expressed the view that if the wage rates were cut down, demand for labor would increase so that all would get employment. It is important to mention here what has been called the Pigou effect or real balance effect. Pigou pointed out that all-round cut in wages will cause price level to fall. The fall in price level will lead to the increase in real value of money assets such as stock of money, deposits in banks, bonds of government or private companies held by them. This implies that due to fall in price level, the purchasing power of their money assets will increase. As a result, they would feel better off or richer, which will lead to their consumption demand for goods and services, which will prevent the fall in any aggregate demand due to all-round cut in wages. Later, Parkinson supported Pigou's view about favorable effect of reduction in wages on fall in price level, with, which according to him will lead to what he calls increase in real money balances. This increase in real money balances, as pointed out earlier, will have a favorable effect on the demand of goods. However, critics have pointed out that the effect of increase in real money balance on consumers' demand for goods and services is quantitatively insignificant, and therefore one cannot rely on this to create enough demand to counteract the fall in demand for goods and services as a result of all-round cut in wages. Keynes challenged the classical theory and put forward a new theory of income and employment. He brought about a fundamental change in economic thought regarding the determination of income and employment in a free market capitalist economy. Therefore, it is often said that Keynes brought about a revolution in our economic theory and laid the foundation of macroeconomic theory.